So tensions are heating up between Palestine and Israel as usual, but what's been going on over the last couple of days is apparently the most escalation there has been since at least 2014. Apparently, there has been weeks of growing tensions because of planned Palestinian expulsions, and then Israeli police destroyed some really special mosque or something, and now it's basically turning into an all-out war. Very exciting times. Now, originally, I was kind of on the fence with who I should support, but then that drag queen Lady MAGA made a compelling case on why we should support Palestine when he tweeted out that they put homosexuals in jail. Just kidding, of course. Now, even though I am enjoying the chaos because things have been so lame and boring lately, I physically could not care any less about the Middle East. Obviously, Israel has caused way more problems for us than Palestine, and I am saddened about the Palestinian Christians being hurt, but overall, I don't care about either one. Our own country is dealing with economic decline, an immigration and demographic crisis, food and gas shortages, sodomy isn't punished with the death penalty, political persecution, election fraud, and worst of all, there are still a lot of Americans who aren't Catholic. So it's hard for me to care about the relationship between two countries that are thousands of miles away from me when all of this is going on right here at home. Unfortunately, our fake and spiritually homosexual country has perpetuated the idea that it's our moral prerogative to take a stance. Now, because of the power of the Israel lobby, the higher-ups of both political establishments share unwavering bipartisan support for Israel. However, the constituency of the Democratic Party seems to be way more critical of Israel than the constituency of the Republican Party. This is a prime example of the left being right for the wrong reasons and the right being wrong for the right reasons. The left thinks the Israeli government is this evil, right-wing, oppressive regime, and they're right that they're evil, but it's not because they're right-wing or oppressive. If they weren't those things, then they probably wouldn't be able to exist. And then you have conservatives having insane support for Israel because they think they're our greatest ally, which of course is complete silly goose nonsense and wrong. They're not our ally at all, but if they were our ally, I guess that would be noble to support them, I guess. And plus, there's the whole degenerate evangelical aspect of it, of why they support it for apocalyptic insane reasons. I'll get to that more later. But you have virtually every single Republican politician posting things on social media saying, pray for Israel. Even people who I really like Paul Gosar and Ron DeSantis. And it's like, all right, yeah, no, I'll pray for Israel. I'll pray for their complete and total annihilation. Just kidding. I'm not purity spiraling. If we have a politician who's a Zionist but good on all the other issues and wants to send leftists to forced labor camps or something, then whatever. But can't we just have one politician who says, yeah, I don't care about the Middle East right now. We have our own problems at home. Is that so much to ask for? Yeah, apparently. Even people like Milo Yiannopoulos are shilling for Israel. It's like, bro, didn't you say you were done being a homosexual? You keep posting how long it's been since you engaged in sodomy, but it's like, sodomy versus supporting Israel, is there really that much of a difference? But most annoying is seeing all of these normies take hardline, staunch positions on the conflict when they know nothing about it. It's fine not to know things. This may come as a shock to some of you, but there's certain things that I don't know as well. But if you don't know something, don't be arrogant and confidently shill something that you're completely oblivious about. I see all of these boomers giving full-blown support to Israel, and they don't even know anything about its history or how it was formed or how the conflict even started or anything. So I figured I would take this opportunity to give a little history lesson on Israel and tell you what the real proper opinion to have is. So Palestine was originally settled by Canaanites, allegedly in 6000 BC, which I don't know if that's accurate because God made the earth less than 10,000 years ago, so that's cutting it close, but it's possible, so we'll just go with that for argument's sake. Over time, various different nations ruled over the land: Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, the Roman empires, and others. And then finally, for 1100 years, Muslims ruled over it. Apparently, for centuries, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived amongst each other on the land peacefully. A bit hard to believe and kind of cucked if that's the case, but that's what my research says. Then, in the 19th century, a man named Theodor Herzl, who was definitely not somebody who went to Latin Mass or received communion on the tongue, he started the Zionist movement. Its goal was to establish a Jewish national homeland. Abstractly, Zionism basically just means Jewish nationalism. Obviously, it's a much more complex and demonic apparatus now, but that's essentially what Zionism means. Herzl originally suggested that Mozambique, Uganda, Argentina, or Palestine be potential places to form this Jewish nation, but after multiple Zionist conferences, they used the Torah to justify returning to Palestine and basically began scheming their way to accomplish this goal. There was a small amount of immigration of Jews to Ottoman-controlled Palestine between 1882 and 1903, as well as other smaller waves that raised the Jewish population from 3% to 8%. Then, in 1917, the Balfour Declaration was signed to Walter Rothschild, another non-Catholic. This was a deal struck up between Zionists and Britain, with the conditions being that Britain would support and assist the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, supporting immigration and land ownership, in exchange for Zionists to use their power and influence in the media and political establishments to convince America to join World War I. This was also one of the main reasons that enhanced Hitler's hatred for Jews, as he called it the Great Stab in the Back. Essentially, he was blaming Zionist Jews for Germany losing the war that they were on the verge of winning until Zionist Jews convinced America to join through propaganda. And of course, losing the war led to the Treaty of Versailles and Germany losing a bunch of territory, and that led to a bunch of inflation and economic problems and all that stuff, but that's a totally different topic for a video I would probably get banned for making. Nevertheless, after the war, Britain took control of Palestine thanks to the San Reno Conference. Now more and more Jews were immigrating and forming Jewish settlements. This, of course, made the Palestinians super duper salty, as land was essentially being stripped from them against their will. Palestinian riots, uprisings, and trade boycotts began, and then the Supreme Muslim Council was formed to be an advisory body in charge of Muslim community affairs in British-controlled Palestine. On the other side of the conflict, Zionist Jews established a covert military organization called the Haganah, which, even though was illegal, had the support of the Eternal Anglos, British. Conflicts continued steadily, as did Jewish immigration, and by 1944, Jews had become 30% of the Palestinian population. In 1936, the Big Palestinian Revolution broke out against the British and Jewish gangs occupying parts of Palestine. The Palestinians were demanding the prohibition of transferring Arab lands to Jews, a complete stop to Jewish immigration, and they wanted to establish a national Palestinian government. Britain tried to come up with a solution and proposed the Peel Commission, which was basically a two-state solution, giving land to the Jews and land to the Arabs, with Jerusalem staying under British mandate. At the time, Jews only held 5.5% of Palestinian land, but the Peel Commission proposed increasing that to 33%. Always with the Masonic numbers, am I right? This would have meant evacuating hundreds of thousands of Palestinians out of the Jewish land to the Arab land. This, of course, made Palestinians angrier than when Beardson Beardsley was told he was too short to join the Lollipop Guild. The Peel Commission, as well as other proposed solutions, were rejected by the Palestinians. Also, more Zionist military organizations started forming, some more extreme than the others, like the Stern Gang, which was just a straight-up terrorist group, and they started committing legitimate bloody massacres on both the British and Arabs to force them to withdraw from Palestine so they could establish a Jewish state. I recommend that you research the King David Hotel bombing as well as the Yassin massacre. In 1947, Britain withdrew from Palestine and approached the United Nations with another partitioning plan that was even worse than the Peel Commission, offering to give Jews over 55% of the land. This was obviously rejected by the Arabs, and in 1948, a war between the Arabs and Jews broke out. Jews BTFO'd the Arabs and ended up with 78% of Palestinian land, way more than any deal they were previously offered. They called this land Israel, and within a year, it was part of the United Nations, and its sovereignty was recognized internationally, mainly on the pretext of sympathy regarding the persecution Jews faced in World War II. I'm not sure if you guys ever heard of something called the Holocaust. It's a bit of an obscure event, but I'm sure you could find an article or two on it if you looked hard enough on the internet. Oh, and fun fact, David Ben-Gurion, definitely not Catholic, was the first Israeli prime minister, and he was a literal terrorist responsible for ethnically cleansing 750,000 Arabs. So, anyway, now, ever since then, conflict has continued between Arabs and Jews. Israel continues to expand, uproot Palestinians, and kind of just murder civilians, including women and children at will, which the Palestinians are not too crazy about. They'll just create new settlements and occupy land illegally, kick people out of their houses and where their ancestors have lived for pretty much thousands of years, and basically just slaughter anyone who resists. And then, of course, Israel will just blame the victim. And this, of course, could all be in preparation for the greater Israel expansion project. You could look more into that. And so now you may say, okay, Israel is an illegitimate state established through lies, manipulation, and terrorism, and not through conquest or anything honorable, so screw them, I'm going to side with Palestine. Now, I can see why you'd say that, but you also have to be a little more nuanced and pragmatic, and you have to remember that this is a multi-generational conflict, and the vast majority of Israelis that are there now had nothing to do with that or how it was established. It's not really the people, it's kind of the government. Same with the Palestinians. But people thinking this can just be easily solved, or that there is some type of solution that doesn't involve one of these groups of people's total annihilation, seem to be hopelessly optimistic. Also, considering Israel has the Samson option, which basically means if they ever face an existential crisis, they will unleash all of their nuclear weapons on the world and kill the entire planet and bring them down with them. So I don't think Israel plans on losing. And now, while I don't hate the Israeli people, I'm not very fond of the Israeli government. Not to be too sensational, but they are a demonic genocidal scourge on the world. But more importantly, their effect on America and our relationship with them has caused nothing but problems for us. They've sunk our Navy ship, the USS Liberty, in 1967 and killed innocent US civilians. There was the Lavon affair in 1954, where Israelis pretended to be Egyptian terrorists and planted bombs in US-owned civilian targets such as movie theaters and education centers in order to try and get us into a war. Then there was the Apollo affair, in which Israel stole 600 pounds of our uranium to help build their illegal nuclear arsenal, as well as being caught spying on us and selling our secrets, and also having some sketchy connections to certain attacks on America. I won't get too specific, but 5 dancing Israelis check, Odego messaging service check, Lucky Larry Silverstein check, I don't know. Not to mention that just our government's support for Israel has made us unnecessary enemies in the Middle East, and all of this is just scratching the surface. So Israel has almost nothing but negative effects on us, yet we're constantly told they're our greatest ally thanks to pressure from the Israel lobby and other Zionist groups that wield an insane amount of power over our elected officials. Of course, if you say this, you're labeled an anti-Semite, but it's no surprise why support for Israel is ostensibly the only issue that has almost unanimous bipartisan support. The main problem, though, is these boomer-tier conservatives loving Israel with all their heart because they think it's the Christian thing to do. Because they think that the Jews are the chosen people, and also a lot of these evangelicals are raging Zionists who think Christ is going to come back to Israel and convert all the good Jews or something. It's like apocalyptic Protestant nonsense. But the reason for this is due to things like the Schofield Bible, which created this idea that anti-Semitism was the worst sin ever, and any nation that doesn't support Israel invites the wrath of God. Just another win for the Protestants, thanks so much. But this, of course, was expanded upon by televangelists, and it turned a whole generation of American Christians into hardcore Zionists. Now, I've talked briefly about this before, but allow me to explain this for people who are unaware. The Israel of the Bible is not referring to the nation-state of Israel established in 1948. The geographical land is the same, but what Israel means in biblical context is those who have God's blessing. That's why Jews think they're the chosen people of God, that they're the Israelites. The problem with that is that it's nonsense. Modern Jews are not Old Testament Jews, neither ethnically or religiously. Old Testament Judaism doesn't exist anymore. Jew back then was synonymous with Israelite, which meant you had God's blessing and were part of the Old Covenant. A new covenant was formed with Jesus Christ, so his believers became the new Israel or chosen people of God. So while Israel is a holy land and historically relevant, the modern nation-state of Israel, established in 1948, is not the Israel referred to in the Bible. Israel is a people, and the new Israel are Christians. Rabbinical Jews who abide by the Talmud follow a newer religion that is a perversion of the old law. Modern Talmudic Jews are rejectors of Christ and therefore reject the new Israel. In fact, in the New Testament, the beginning uses Jew synonymously with Israelite, but after Christ, it's used in a pejorative to describe Christ's rejectors and murderers. Modern Jews who claim to practice the old law actually don't. 1, because they don't have a priest or a sacrifice, and 2 is because Christ was the fulfillment of the old law and the prophecies. Jesus also tells the Jews who denied him, the Pharisees, if you believed in the prophets, you'd believe in me because they spoke of me. If you believed in my Father, you would believe in me. Your father is the devil. You are the synagogue of Satan. Paraphrasing, of course, but that's essentially the gist. Also, the Talmud, which Jews place its relevance over the Old Testament, references Jesus Christ when it blasphemes him and says that he's burning and boiling excrement and that the Blessed Virgin Mary was a whore, which shows that Talmudic Judaism is not the same as Old Testament Judaism, but in fact a newer, corrupted version of it. So no, modern Jews are not the chosen people. Judeo-Christianity is an oxymoron. So trying to use that as a basis for supporting Israel is nonsense.
Jews think they're superior to everyone, and that everyone else has to be a slave to the Jews always.
Don't have to be. They're gonna be. They're gonna wanna be.
Okay.
It's not gonna be like
Forced.
Forced. It's gonna be by free choice.
Okay. Where in the Torah does it say this, by the way?
In the Zohar.
The Zohar is not the Torah. The Talmud.
אסור לצלם, תעצור.
The Zohar is not the Torah. The Talmud. The Talmud.
I respect you, respect me.
Doesn't have to respect you. Doesn't have to respect you.
That is the right thing. Are you Jewish? Do you want to honor God? That is the godly thing to do. We respect one another.
The godly thing to do is to kill you.
The godly thing is to kill me.
That's right.
Yes?
That's what the Torah says.
The Torah says to kill us.
The Torah says that people who worship idols such as yourself, when there is a Sanhedrin,
To kill us.
yes,
Okay.
that's what the Torah
So
says.
we know how the Jewish people feel about Christians, yes? That you
Christians
discriminate
are-
against Christians.
Christians are idol
You
worshippers.
discriminate.
But we have this rising conflict now where things have just been getting progressively intense. Civilians are being killed, buildings are collapsing, different countries and groups are taking sides, guerrilla warfare is breaking out. Things are heating up, and I gotta say, I'm enjoying the show. Something is finally happening, maybe. Maybe this will lead to a crazy world-changing event, I don't know. Or maybe it's just another psyop and the Middle East doesn't even exist, I don't know, I've never been there. Either way, it's fun to witness. But from an outsider's perspective, Palestine does sort of have the moral high ground, if you want to say that. They're the ones that are still being displaced. They don't really have institutional backing. Meanwhile, Israel has America and a bunch of other strong countries on their side and have an insane military that is just leveling buildings. Hamas launches dozens of bullcrap missiles. The Israeli Iron Dome intercepts like 90% of them. And then Israel sends airstrikes and flattens half of a city and sends armed forces to slaughter civilians. And apparently Hamas is launching these missiles at strategic tactical targets like airports and banks and armories, while Israel is just destroying residential buildings and killing children. So it's clearly not an even fight. Also, a lot of the IDF soldiers are scumbags. They have this saying that means 1 bullet, 2 kills for when they kill a pregnant Palestinian lady. Oh, and I just saw this IDF guy who died the other day had tweets bragging about raping a Palestinian lady. Israel is also a safe haven for Jewish American pedophiles and is the human trafficking capital of the world. But like I said, honestly, with this whole conflict and this whole situation, I don't care. These Zionists and neocons want to simp for Israel, and then you have these wignats who want to put Palestinian flags in their bio, and both are super gay. I feel bad for the children and the Christians that are suffering because there's like 70,000 Christians in Palestine, I believe. But ultimately, you want to know who's right between Israel and Palestine? Me. And you know what my position is? Neither Jews or Muslims have a claim over the Holy Land. It belongs to the children of Christ. We should have a new crusade and establish the kingdom of Jerusalem. So yes, we should pray for Israel. We should pray that Israel comes to their senses and talks with the Muslims, and they both realize that they worship false gods and need to give the Holy Land to the Catholics. That's the only correct take you should have on this whole situation. Unfortunately, a crusade and other awesome stuff doesn't seem likely, so I guess we just have to kind of sit back and watch. But you should really stop caring so much about this nonsense and care about your own country. That's basically it. This video might be the video that gets me banned, so follow me on Telegram, Gab, and Instagram. Links will be in the description. Bye.